They wore badges, cracked jokes, and ruled the box office. But off-camera, many of them were losing everything. Police Academy was pure laughter in the 1980s, yet the fame it created destroyed more lives than it saved. What happened to the stars after the laughter faded is a story Hollywood never wanted you to hear. Steve Guttenberg as Carey Mahoney. Steve Guttenberg was born on August 24, 1958, in Brooklyn, New York. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, Guttenberg was just 25 years old, perfectly cast as Carey Mahoney, the charming, rebellious cadet whose smirk, sarcasm, and reluctant heroism became the heart of the franchise. He followed Police Academy with box office hits like Cocoon, 1985, and 3 Men and a Baby, 1987, briefly ranking among Hollywood's most bankable young actors. But success came with a hidden cost. By stepping away from the Police Academy series after the 4th film, he attempted to escape typecasting, a move that quietly backfired. As the industry shifted in the early 1990s, leading roles dried up, and Guttenberg found himself losing momentum just as his contemporaries transitioned into more dramatic or mature parts. A short-lived marriage in the late 1980s ended in divorce, coinciding with growing frustration over his fading star power. While he avoided the extreme scandals that plagued many peers, Guttenberg openly acknowledged the psychological toll of watching fame evaporate. As of 2026, Steve Guttenberg is 66 years old. He remains active in regional theater, occasional film projects, and fan conventions, where nostalgia has restored his value in a different way. Michael Winslow as Larvell Jones. Born on September 6, 1958 in Spokane, Washington, Michael Winslow was just 25 years old when Police Academy debuted in 1984. He was cast as Larvell Jones, the soft-spoken cadet whose uncanny ability to recreate any sound imaginable transformed him into the franchise's most unforgettable comic weapon. The role brought instant recognition, but it also narrowed his path. Winslow continued appearing in sequels and expanded into films like Spaceballs, 1987, and Gremlins 2, The New Batch, 1990, showcasing his talent beyond the Academy walls. Yet Hollywood struggled to imagine him outside the novelty of his sound effects, and as the 1990s progressed, major roles became increasingly scarce. While his voice work remained in demand, the mainstream spotlight slowly dimmed. A painful divorce in the early 1990s was followed by financial mismanagement that nearly cost him everything. At his lowest point, he revealed that he came dangerously close to homelessness, forced to rely on small gigs and live performances to survive. Now, in 2026, Michael Winslow is 67 years old. He has rebuilt his life through stand-up comedy, voice performance, and fan conventions. Bubba Smith as Moses Hightower. Charles Aaron Bubba Smith, born on February 28, 1945, in Orange, Texas. Long before Police Academy, Smith was already a legend in American football, becoming an NFL star and a Super Bowl champion. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, Smith was 39 years old, cast as Moses Hightower, the towering, soft-spoken cadet whose gentle nature contrasted perfectly with his intimidating frame. The role gave Smith a second act after football, but his body was already paying the price of years of professional sports. Chronic injuries from his NFL career followed him into acting, gradually limiting the types of roles he could take. While he continued appearing in later Police Academy sequels and family-friendly films like Revenge of the Nerds, 1984, persistent pain and declining mobility forced him to step back from physically demanding work. As the years passed, Smith's physical condition deteriorated further. Repeated surgeries, weight fluctuations, and cardiovascular problems became a constant struggle, eroding both his independence and public visibility. Bubba Smith passed away on August 3, 2011, at the age of 66 from natural causes related to his long-term health issues. David Graf as Eugene Tackleberry. Born on April 16, 1950, in Lancaster, Ohio, David Graf was 34 years old when Police Academy debuted in 1984. He was perfectly cast as Eugene Tackleberry, the gun-obsessed, trigger-happy cadet whose wild-eyed enthusiasm and explosive energy made him one of the franchise's most iconic characters. After Police Academy, he reprised Tackleberry throughout the sequels and appeared in films like National Lampoon's Movie Madness, 1982, and later in television roles. But Hollywood struggled to see him beyond the unhinged cop persona. As the 1990s arrived, opportunities narrowed, and Graf found himself repeatedly cast in variations of the same character, loud, aggressive, and comically unstable. The weight of typecasting quietly stalled his professional growth, even as his performance remained beloved by audiences. Off-screen, Graf lived far from the chaos he portrayed. He was known among friends as disciplined and health-conscious, a man who exercised regularly and avoided excess, making the end all the more shocking. On April 7, 2001, while attending a friend's wedding in Phoenix, Arizona, David Graf suffered a sudden heart attack and collapsed. Despite immediate medical attention, he could not be revived. David Graf died at just 50 years old. Marian Ramsay as Laverne Hooks. Born on May 10, 1947 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Marian Ramsay was 36 years old when Police Academy premiered in 1984. She was cast as Laverne Hooks, the petite, soft-spoken cadet whose childlike whisper could suddenly explode into a commanding shout under pressure. After appearing in several sequels, Ramsay found herself increasingly sidelined as Hollywood struggled to imagine roles for a woman who didn't fit conventional leading lady molds. She took supporting parts in projects like Back to the Beach, 1987, and later made occasional television appearances, but the momentum never returned. The industry's limited space for black actresses of her generation made her decline less visible and far more isolating. As the years passed, Ramsay largely withdrew from the spotlight. While she continued to attend fan conventions and voice work sporadically, her absence from major productions reflected a broader pattern of quiet erasure rather than personal scandal. Marian Ramsay passed away on January 7, 2021, at the age of 73, following a brief illness. Leslie Easterbrook as Debbie Callahan. Leslie Easterbrook was born on July 29, 1949, in Los Angeles, California. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, she was 34 years old and cast as Debbie Callahan, the confident, commanding instructor whose unapologetic authority and presence made her one of the franchise's most striking figures. The character made Easterbrook famous, but it also sealed her image. While she continued working in films like Private Resort, 1985, and later embraced darker genres with appearances in The Devil's Rejects, 2005, serious dramatic opportunities remained elusive. The very traits that made Callahan groundbreaking, strength, sexuality, and dominance, became obstacles in an industry uncomfortable with women who embodied all three at once. As trends shifted in the 1990s, Easterbrook found herself pushed to the margins, competing in an environment that prized youth over experience and novelty over authority. Though she never disappeared entirely, the frustration of being overlooked for complex roles marked a quiet professional decline rather than a public collapse. As of 2025, Leslie Easterbrook is 75 years old. She lives largely out of the public eye, appearing occasionally at fan conventions where her portrayal of Debbie Callahan is now celebrated as ahead of its time. George Gaynes as Commandant Eric Lassard. George Gaynes was born on May 16, 1917, in Helsinki, Finland. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, he was already 67 years old, cast as Commandant Eric Lassard, the absent-minded, soft-spoken academy leader whose gentle confusion and unintended wisdom became the comedic soul of the franchise. Unlike many of his co-stars, Gaynes entered Police Academy with decades of experience behind him, including memorable roles in Tootsie, 1982, and later Punky Brewster, where he played another beloved authority figure. In 1989, Gaynes suffered the devastating loss of his only son, Matthew, who was killed in a car accident while traveling in India. The tragedy deeply affected him, casting a long shadow over his later years. As he aged, health issues naturally followed, and Gaynes gradually stepped away from acting in the 1990s. Though he never publicly dramatized his pain, friends noted that the loss of his son changed him profoundly, bringing a deeper melancholy beneath his trademark gentleness. George Gaynes passed away on February 15, 2016, at the age of 98, from natural causes. G.W. Bailey as Thaddeus Harris. George William G.W. Bailey was born on August 27, 1944, in Port Arthur, Texas. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, Bailey was 39 years old, cast as Lieutenant Thaddeus Harris, the scheming, short-tempered antagonist whose obsessive rivalry with Carrie Mahoney provided the franchise with its most effective comic foil. After Police Academy, he built a steady career with roles in St. Elsewhere and later found renewed visibility as Detective Louis Provenza on The Closer and Major Crimes. Still, his career rose and fell with television cycles, and despite his reliability, Bailey was rarely elevated beyond supporting status. His visibility never fully matched his talent, leaving him familiar, but rarely celebrated. Bailey's personal life was shaped by far deeper challenges. In the late 1980s, his young son was diagnosed with leukemia, a battle that ended in tragedy and permanently altered Bailey's priorities. Years later, he faced his own health crisis with lung cancer, further narrowing his public presence. Rather than retreat into bitterness, Bailey channeled his grief into action, co-founding the Sunshine Kids Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting children with cancer, a mission that became more central to his identity than acting itself. As of 2026, G.W. Bailey is 81 years old. His health has slowed him, and he now lives largely out of the spotlight, focusing on philanthropic work rather than performance. Debralee Scott as Violet Fackler. Debralee Scott was born on April 2, 1953, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, she was 31 years old, cast as Violet Fackler, the earnest, slightly awkward trainee whose sweetness and vulnerability set her apart amid the film's broad comedy. Scott's personal life, however, proved far more turbulent than her screen presence suggested. In the early 1980s, she married actor Jonathan Frakes, later famous for Star Trek: The Next Generation. The marriage ended in divorce in 1986, just as Frakes' career accelerated and Scott's began to stall. While she continued working sporadically, the emotional weight of the breakup coincided with a gradual professional slowdown. Her greatest heartbreak came years later. Scott became engaged to John Dennis Levi, a police officer with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. On September 11, 2001, Levi was killed during the World Trade Center attacks while responding to the disaster. Overwhelmed by grief, she developed a severe alcohol addiction, which eventually led to cirrhosis of the liver. In 2005, shortly after moving to Florida to live with her sister, Scott fell into a coma and was hospitalized. Though she briefly regained consciousness and was discharged on her birthday, she died peacefully in her sleep 3 days later. On April 5, 2005, at just 52 years old. Kim Cattrall as Karen Thompson. Kim Cattrall, born on August 21, 1956, in Liverpool, England. When Police Academy premiered in 1984, she was 27 years old, cast as Karen Thompson, a confident, intelligent, and openly sensual cadet whose presence brought a sharper, more adult edge to the film's humor. After Police Academy, Cattrall followed the film with projects like Porky's, 1981, and Big Trouble in Little China, 1986, steadily building visibility but struggling to escape being viewed primarily through a sexualized lens. Behind the scenes, her personal life was marked by instability. Multiple marriages during the 1980s and 1990s ended in divorce, each leaving emotional scars that Cattrall later acknowledged shaped her guarded public persona. In 1998, at an age when many actresses were already being sidelined, Cattrall was cast as Samantha Jones in Sex and the City. The role transformed her into a global icon, but also reopened old wounds, reigniting debates about ageism, sexuality, and the cost of playing women who refuse to shrink themselves for comfort. Fame returned, but so did pressure, scrutiny, and highly publicized conflicts within the industry. As of 2026, Kim Cattrall is 69 years old. She continues to act selectively in television and film, choosing roles on her own terms while remaining outspoken about women's autonomy and aging in Hollywood. Nearly 40 years later, Police Academy still makes us laugh. But the lives behind the laughter tell a much darker story. Some rose, some fell, and some were quietly forgotten by the industry they once ruled. Which cast member's journey shocked you the most? Leave a comment, like, and subscribe as we continue uncovering the untold stories behind Hollywood's brightest comedies.